That old lizard king. That old lizard king's sitting down there deep under those roads and the rivers and hills. Deeper than the underside of the sky. He's down there, in a stone palace, putting out his foul reek and grinning. In that palace he keeps musicians, playing all the time, a session always changing behind the eyes of thunder. Free to come, free to go, but that jam lasts forever. It's the jam of rocks and bones and things with fire for blood, boiling air and thunder. Before the belly of the ocean, where that old lizard king's at. Not such a malignant devil, just a shrewd reptilian. Prodding, insistent, strong. Indifferent to all the right things in the universe. Well, what works for him? And he lives on the deepest stone, smells the oldest smells, hears the old groaning complaints of trees from above, and alien sounds of fauna beyond the sun. The heedless spirits running around crazy in the woods hear his primeval session, and it shapes their panic, as it would thicken your blood. They're the ones dancing at night, those crazy spirits, around the ankles of old pines sunk in sand, over the moon's placid face in the water, dancing to his music, dancing for the sun, naked youth ripping themselves to pieces, desperate to remain aloft in the strains of music, out of time and passing through the world like a loving hand passes through hair, next to the skin, calling out blood like an old brother. Next to a deep lake, the wind is sighing. I can hear this music in the wind, coming through the pines, that session. My soul rises to the storms, blood boiling to the call, gravity grows arthritic and limp, and I can feel these things. The dead. The dead. The dead. The dead. The dead. Deader than dead, the dead. Deader than dead, the dead. Decrepit in the old barrow, repossessing womb, grinding cannon of pagan offerings, hillsides, barrows, barrows. Barrow whites, fool. Barrow downs for all the dead north of Belleville. The dead buried in barrows, the dead buried in barrows, the dead buried in barrows in the hillsides, barrow downs. Lights in the grass of the graveyard, the city you can only get one-way tickets to. Shaw! It doesn't look it, but that lawn is the widest ocean. The lawn of graveyard, the graveyard with little lights in North Bay. People plant them for dead relatives, I gather, leave them sticking out of the ground. The dead, the dead, the dead, waiting and watching in their distant village. Waiting and watching and waiting and watching and waiting and watching. But I think more about cremation. Cremation suits me more. People can really put the idea to you. People seek out that kind of fatalistic comfort in their minds. Lord, a prayer. Give strength to the hand that sets the fuel, that strikes the flame, that collects the ashes and spreads them, and gives them to the great wind. No waiting, no watching, no farce of coffin or formaldehyde. The dead, on the wind, in the wind, blowing and blowing and blowing and blowing. This one's called The Dead 2. This is dead poem number 2. Number 2. It goes like this. The dead are left lying out in the grey morning on the cooling battlefield, with coins over their eyes, arms folded, looking like each lines the bottom of a canoe that drifted, is still. The survivors laid them out this way. The survivors have moved on. Okay, I've got one more poem for you. I want to read this poem about a medicine woman if I can find her. Oh, there she is. There is medicine woman. Oh, and lycanthropes.
we go through lycanthropes first, okay? Okay, whoever is crazy enough to still be watching. This poem is called Lycanthropes. Animals dancing dressed in pastels, dancing in the high hall of night. The high hall for dancing. Music, firelight, and the faint reek of pine, the billowing of beer, turbulent as magma, inside them the haze of smoke. They find the thing that's dripping the universal color and start carrying the limbless mass around on their furry shoulders one at a time until they all fall down from exhaustion. They're carrying the thunder of their world, the worm that goes before all things, all stuck with feathers suspended from its flanks at careful angles to give that young worm its wings. It's flying around the ring become world, become ring again, circles traveling in the night, standing still. Happy people dancing, the last few forgetful in the face of dawn. The smoke from the fire is thin and tangy, with the perspiration of trees. That smoke's harrying along the last mist to an afternoon nirvana. Those people will be late for the morning after. Lycanthropes, and thou medicine woman. Some summer night in North Bay, Ontario, Canada. Blue, 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 big blue, 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 big blue lake and a big blue sky. Primordial shads crusted onto everything. I was overdressed. I love dressing up. Maybe a little too much. It was at the club, and all I could do was watch women dancing and drink whiskey and coke and feel like a stranger passing by in the breeze, like I usually do. Some old woman introduced herself, well, after introducing her whole family, who all seemed very nice, and gave me a sad look. Why aren't you dancing with those girls? Or those boys, whoever. Like the medicine woman in an imitation disco, she squeezed my hand. I wish I could have told her how all I felt was inconsistent, fractured, isolated, alone, an engine, open to the wind and watching, wondering, completing something inside myself, or as something completed itself, blooming, maybe, exploding, decaying. Something three-dimensional and fast, too hot to touch, too stubborn to budge, that didn't know if the burning would ever end, or if time would ever start living again, and I'd stop being mute and on the moon, but I didn't need to tell her anything. She understood everything. I really appreciate that old woman holding my hand. That is all. Thank you for listening.